Welcome to the event series Cultural Heritage Protection in Germany, organized by the German National Academy of Sciences Leopoldina. I'm a professor of organizational behavior at the ICN Business School and the Université de Lorraine in France, and member of the working group on archaeological heritage of the Leopoldina. And we are very pleased to see that so many participants are registered to this particular event. The virtual series Cultural Heritage Protection in Germany aims to provide insights into the prerequisites for successful cultural heritage protection. Our focus is, in general, on inter-organizational cooperation and the drivers for successful collaboration. Today's event focuses on a technical aspect. The Cologne Archives and Libraries and the Cologne Fire Department have developed a mobile container for emergency situations. This container provides workstations for written and photographic documentation for cleaning and packing of cultural property. Our speaker today is Corinne Henderson from the Historical Archives of the City of Cologne, who will explain to us how this container works in practice. Mrs. Thiel and Mr. Peters are with us too, and can answer specific questions eventually. An important information at this point, the container for technical reason cannot be presented in situ. We have instead a video recording of how it functions, and the recording will show all the functions of the container just as well. In order not to disturb the flow of the video too much, we would like to ask you to keep your questions in the chat so that we can collect them, and all questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. Mrs. Henderson, the digital floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here and pleased to present our container, our project. And it's fantastic that there are so many people here with us today. For the German presentation that we've just held, there were over 200 people, and it's now fantastic to be able to present the container to an international audience. So thank you very much for joining us today. So the speakers have already been presented. I will start here at the beginning. So the conception and the requirements for the container. So what were the ideas behind it? What was the inspiration, motivation, so to say? So unfortunately in Cologne, I'm sure many people are aware, we are no stranger to disaster. The historical archive, the building itself collapsed in 2009. This is a huge disaster. Unfortunately, 2 people also died in the neighboring buildings. And so we have a lot of experience in dealing with disasters, the aftermath, and that experience was then also utilized in Rio in Brazil in 2018. I'm sure as well many people are aware there was a terrible fire at the museum, and 2 employees from the City Archive here in Cologne were able then to go as consultants to Brazil to assist with the aftermath of the disaster. But what we became aware of during these disasters was that there was something missing, or something that could be improved in the quick response. And that's in fact the workplaces. So it takes a long time to organize materials and people, and in a disaster zone, there's not necessarily any workspaces where the objects can be treated. And so we really wanted to create a way to have the workstations and all of the necessary equipment and materials together in one place, so that we could respond very quickly and have everything that we needed already present. So we have been working together with the Fire Brigade. It's been a very close collaborative project the entire time. And initially the idea, as many people already do, is to have just the materials stored by the Fire Brigade, or to be stored in gitter trolleys, gitter boxes. But the fear was, we thought, if we need so much material in a disaster, and if it's to be transported, Perhaps it cannot all be transported in one vehicle. Perhaps the shift commander at the fire brigade at the time won't be able to locate it quickly enough, won't have the available transport. And so we really wanted to simplify matters, which we were also advised by the fire brigade was a very good idea, and to, again, just to have everything together, transportable in one place. So the idea is really to be able to respond to a large number of or different types of disasters, to be able to treat many different types of materials, regardless of the location where the disaster might take place, and also regardless of weather. So summer, winter, storm, we would really like to then be able to respond in the best capacity. It was also very important to us that the system be durable, be low maintenance, of course, then low maintenance costs as well, and to be fully compatible with the emergency infrastructure that we have here in Germany. So we also, in 2018, we founded in Cologne an emergency association, so with the libraries and archives in the city of Cologne. And that was an inspiration. So the container actually belongs to the Emergency Association. And the idea is then that it's very quickly ready, the container. So within 15 minutes, that it should be available on the site of the disaster. Okay, going on to the next slide. So here is some general information about the container. You can see it in the left picture on the swap body vehicle. So that's how it's transported. And then the container will be loaded onto and off of this. So it's of course delivered by the fire brigade. You can see their foyer there. There are stations within the container for up to 8 people to work, as well as all of the said storage, the dimensions and the weight. So that is standardized so that it can be transported by any of the emergency services in Germany, and also by private companies eventually who have suitable vehicles. So that increases the flexibility and the suitability of it to the country. There are connections within the container for water and electricity. So it can be plugged into a regular socket, doesn't need any special kind of electricity, and the water is then provided by the nearest water hydrant. And as I said, it can be used regardless of weather. So we actually have heating within the container, infrared heating. We haven't had to use that yet. Up until now, all of our disasters have taken place in summer. So it's been more a problem that we've been a bit overheated, but it means again that it's flexible. So if there happens to be a incident in the winter, then we can also respond to it. Because of course, if you're working with water, with wet materials, and it's also very low temperatures, then it's not a pleasant experience, and potentially health and safety risky as well. So as I said, yes, can be transported by all of the emergency services then. So moving on here, I'll just talk a little bit about the different stations that we have within the container. So this is a bird's eye view. We have 2 doors into the container, and the idea is that you'd start on the so right-hand side, so underneath it there on the picture, with the documentation workstation. Then we have a photographic station, area for dry cleaning, for rinsing, and also preparation for freezing. So that's then stretching the objects. And it, again, I'm going to keep saying flexible. So that was very important to us when we were designing this. For instance, with documentation, we have different available models. So we can work with paper documentation. We also have laptops and barcode scanners. We have cameras for photographs. So we can really respond to the specific situation. In some instances, documentation won't be required or desired, but we wanted to have everything available in terms of material in case that is necessary. So up until now, the dry cleaning area has not been used for dry cleaning because we've only been working with flooded materials, but it's possible that that will be required in the future. And so for rinsing station, you can see there in the top picture, we have 2 taps with a grate then to support the objects, and underneath the stretching station. So you'll see all of those in more detail as I progress with the presentation. So moving on to storage, you can see we have ample storage. We also have ample equipment and materials. So we have a range of Euro boxes, also standard in various sizes. We also have cupboard space and trolleys. So we have 5 trolleys that are secured in the aisle. And you can see in the middle picture, there's a bar across which secures the trolley in place. And this system is more commonly used in airplanes. So if you can imagine a takeoff and landing, there are similar angles involved when loading the container onto and off of the vehicle. So these photos are a little bit old as well. We've since then labeled all of the boxes and the trolleys, so it's much easier to find everything. So I'd like to go on to talk about a little the first operation that we conducted. So I'll say as well, the container was completed in the autumn of 2020, and we had great plans for it. We wanted to present it and complete various training days. Unfortunately, with the pandemic, none of that was possible. And so the first outing of the container was a real situation, a real operation. And so it was a little bit a baptism of fire then to really figure out what works and what could be improved within the container within this disaster situation. So Stolberg is a town or a city, I believe, in the west of Germany. It's about an hour away from Cologne. And they got in touch with us after the terrible, terrible floods in the summer of last year. I'm sure many people are aware they affected Germany and neighboring countries as well. And we responded. So I can also say, perhaps as a side point, originally it was intended that the container was only to be used in the city of Cologne and only by the member institutions of the Emergency Association. But we very quickly realized we didn't want to sit by and not help when we were in a very good position to help. And so we traveled with other members of the Emergency Association to Stolberg, and we began the salvage operation there with some members of the Cologne Fire Brigade and also some army people who were there as well. So there were several storerooms in Stolberg from the city archive there that was badly affected. I believe there were 4 storerooms and they were all entirely affected. So everything got wet, everything got muddy. It was a very big operation. So the city archivist there had already begun the salvage operation a few days before at the town hall. So that's the main site. And so we didn't really want to interrupt their operation. So we decided there was a storeroom just around the corner that had not yet been opened, not yet been salvaged. And so we set up operations there with the container, and then built up around the container various tents as well and other stations to treat these salvaged materials. So not only was there the city archive, but there was also the city museum. So they were both held in the same store. And you can see within the central image there, really the level of damage and destruction that affected the objects. So the white cupboards have been completely tipped over. there was mud everywhere. The water had gone up to the ceiling. And in fact, the cellar was supposed to be flood-proof. So it didn't have any windows and it had a very secure door. But the pressure of the water, of the flood water, meant that at some point the door was forced open and the water came into the room with such force that everything was then completely muddled. So all of the order, all of the objects were mixed up, so from the museum and from the archive, and it was a difficult operation because the white cupboards that you can see, they were filled with very heavy files, and a lot of those had fallen face first, and so to salvage those materials took quite some work. So going on to the next image. So here you can get an impression of what it was like. And I would say as well that every day it was a little bit different. So we were salvaging different materials every day. Sometimes they were very large architectural plans. Sometimes there were a lot of objects from the city museum. And so we had to really respond to what was being salvaged, where we could best treat those objects, and also how many volunteers turned up. So you can see here almost everybody in the picture are volunteers who lived locally, some of whom had been personally affected by the disaster, and were very keen to help. And here you can see within the container. So again, these are volunteers working, and health and safety was extremely important. So not only Corona, the pandemic, but also the floodwaters were potentially contaminated. And so we were all working with masks and gloves and aprons and also rubber boots. So really to keep ourselves as safe as possible. And there was a variety of objects that were being salvaged, as you can see there. So we had a lot of rolled plans, we had photographic materials, we had some very, very oversized plans that barely fitted on a pallet because they were so large. We had books and very diverse objects from the city museum. So we kept wondering why we were finding coffee beans everywhere. We were rinsing objects of mud and we were finding coffee beans everywhere, but we found there was a collection of coffee grinders held within the city museum. There were also bicycles and life-size puppets. So it was really quite an array of things that needed considering how they were best to be treated. So most of the objects from the archive were paper-based, and they were then transported to cold storage. There were several transports a day. And a lot of the objects from the City Museum were then air dried at a local hall. So I will go on now. So the second operation that we took part in was in Bad Neuenahr Ahrweiler. It's the town museum. It's also fairly close to Cologne, so perhaps I'll say again an hour away. And the situation there was similar. They had been affected at the same time, and it was a very bad situation in the city as well. In this case, it was decided because the roads were so damaged leading to Ahrweiler, and the infrastructure there was in such a very poor state that it would actually be better to treat the objects at a different location. And this is where I can say something about collaboration and how important that is. So we worked together with the Emergency Association in Weimar, which is quite a long way away, but they have created an emergency response vehicle, which is specialized for the collection of emergency objects. So this vehicle is in fact climatized, which means that the objects can then be collected from a disaster site and then brought to a different location for for further treatment. And so that's what we did. So Weimar came with their emergency container, which you can see here in the far left picture. It's the left vehicle of the left picture. So they brought various transports of objects that had been salvaged on site. They brought those to Cologne, and we treated them in the parking lot of the historical archive, which you can see there, the objects being loaded off of the truck and then the objects in the container. I will say as well, it was bad timing. I'm sure disasters never take place at a good time, but we were actually in the middle of moving the archive into our new building in the Stolberg week, and then in this week, which was 2 weeks later, we were moving our studios, so all of the conservation studios, we were moving them. And so if the employees were very busy, we'd all had other plans for the week, which had to be changed at quite short notice. But I suppose that's always the way that disasters happen. So also in between the 2 weeks, we had a week of recuperation, perhaps, where we cleaned the container, which had got very dirty in Stolberg, and also replenished some of the stock that had been used, some of the materials. So here is another impression of that operation. So you can see we built it up in a similar fashion to in Stolberg. So the container formed a central point of the operation, and we were then working with tables and tents outside and lots of water. So the I believe in this operation, so mold was much more of an issue. So if the objects had lain longer in water, it was also the height of summer. It had been very hot at that time. So in Stolberg, we were lucky. There were only a few objects that were affected with mold, and those were predominantly the leather objects. So a couple of manuscripts, the leather covers, or saddles, belts from the Social History Museum. But in Ahrweiler, mold was much more of a problem. And so again, it was very important to work with protective equipment. And you can also see some variety of objects that were treated. So I believe it was predominantly paper-based that we treated in Cologne, and there were some other collections that were then taken to different locations. So going on to discuss our initial findings. So this is almost a pair slide to the very beginning, what we set out to achieve, and is pleased to say most of the things we can say that we have in fact achieved. So we were very pleased that the deployment and the start of the operations were in fact able to take place very quickly. That was successful. The container was in fact compatible with the infrastructure, with the various vehicles of the fire brigade, also the Technisches Hilfswerk, so it's another emergency services in Germany. They were also involved. And really just that the container could successfully be used in combination with other things. So either with the emergency vehicle from Weimar or the tents, so it can really form a central point of an operation. And that has worked very well. Also, it has proven to have low maintenance costs, which have been taken care of by the fire brigade. Yeah, so generally it has been a success. We have here some future perspectives. So there are things that can be improved, and within the container, also further afield, and generally within the emergency structures within within Germany. So it's very important that we work on creating further operational plans, not only within the municipality and with the local emergency organizations, but then also within the other municipalities, within the other states, and then nationally as well. So there required quite a lot of discussion beforehand to make sure that the container could in fact travel to these other states, to be used in certain ways. And we want it really to be already agreed how these structures can work, who is responsible for what, who are the who will lead these operations, who are the contact people. So really to have these plans in place, preferably to have completed training days and run-throughs so that everybody who will be involved in an actual disaster is aware of it and knows what their role will be within the situation. So again, just networking. So really creating those connections to the emergency services is absolutely vital. So the container is kept at the local fire brigade and will be set up with the help of the local fire brigade. And without them, it's just not possible. So it's really important to have those relationships in place before something actually happens. And then also to know your neighbors, to know the other cultural institutions, and to encourage them to work together with their local emergency services. So further future perspectives. As was said, so we were hoping to be able to present live from the container today, which would have been very exciting. But unfortunately, or fortunately, it's in the garage, it's in the workshop being adapted and optimized. So there are several things that are being completed on it. So ideas or things that we noticed during the training days, during the actual operations that didn't work as well as we had hoped, or things just occurred to us how we could do things better. And so, for instance, we're going to adapt the workstations so that there will be more stations for rinsing and more stations for the stretching as well, so for preparation for freezing. And that means that we can just remain as adaptable as possible. So in Stolberg, for instance, we didn't complete any documentation, we didn't take any photographs. And so those spaces, those stations in the container were used more as a storage, which wasn't bad. You know, it was good to have a place to put the objects before being treated, but it would be much better if we could say, okay, so in this situation, we need a lot of rinsing, or we need a lot of stretching, or perhaps we also need dry cleaning, and then to be able to use those stations really in the most flexible and most efficient manner possible. We're also going to increase, so at the moment we only have one pipe, water pipe leading away from the container, and means if we have all of our taps running at the same time, and also a lot of water from wet objects, then it can get a little damp in the container. Luckily, we have a slip-proof floor, but so we will also be improving features like that within the container. But it's really exciting. I always find it fantastic when we're doing training days or working together with other people, how creative people can be and how many ideas there are. I think with emergency planning, it's always a case of adaptation and improvement and reconsidering what might be possible. And that's certainly the case with us. So we're very thankful for all of the input that we've received from so many people. We're also going to be acquiring additional materials. So as I was saying, after every training day, we come away with a list of things we want to improve, and also a shopping list of things we'd like to buy for the container. And so we'll be acquiring those as well. And if anybody is interested in seeing the container live, we actually have 2 dates coming up. So live, I mean in person. We're going to be presenting the container on the 15th of October in Cologne, and that will be for the European Day of Conservation and Restoration. So be very happy to see anybody there. And also it will be presented at the trade fair in Leipzig towards the end of November. So if you are as excited as we are by it, then please feel free to come down and see us. So the final future perspective that we have is then that as part of the recovery aid program provided by the federal government for the 4 states that were so severely affected by the floods in the summer of last year, they will be receiving up to 30 million euros. So that is very encouraging, and it will be used for a manner of things, and hopefully some of that will also go towards the further treatment of the cultural property that was affected during the floods. Also, very excitingly, there will be 10 additional containers that will be commissioned and located around Germany. So these will be based on the Cologne model, with also some of the improvements that we have noticed need to be carried out. And it's very exciting. So they will be located with fire brigades or local emergency services throughout the country in different states. And it will then be a case of really creating those networks. So creating relationships between emergency services and with the cultural institutions, with the emergency associations. And so there's a lot of work to do, but it's very encouraging how much support there is for the emergency response and preparation planning in Germany at the moment, and hopefully that will continue. So we're very keen to see how these things progress. It must be said as well, so at the moment with the fire brigade specifically, there are different laws in each of the federal states, and they're sometimes a little bit vague when it comes to cultural heritage. So I believe most of the states' laws do not in fact mention cultural heritage, and they mention objects of value, which is of course very vague and open to interpretation. And so it's important that those structures are formalized, those legal frameworks are formalized, and that cultural heritage is mentioned, and then that everybody is aware who is responsible for what exactly, what is to be expected, what does that mean. So there is still room for improvement there. So next, as we are not able to present live from the containers today, we have prepared a short film, which I will show to you now. So this was filmed at a training day at the end of August, which was fantastic. So it was held between 4 different emergency associations here in the west of Germany. So Cologne and Münster, Duisburg and Detmold. And we worked together for 2 days then, each with around 40 people, to try out the container, to get to know each other, and to experience then the different workflows in an emergency. So I will press play, I hope. Here we are. So this is drone footage. We have a drone within the container. We also have a GoPro camera. And this was the first tryout of the drone. So the footage is perhaps a little bit shaky, but we were excited to play with our new toy. So here it is. So you can see here inside the container, there's the rinsing station with the taps and swinging round. That's where the photo station is. Currently, it's not built there, there. We are also going to be adapting that in our current adaptation. So that was a temporary photo station on the side. There is our drone flyer, who's really enjoyed it. And so you can see the anti-slip floor down the bottom, and then on the left-hand side, also the stretching stations. And me looking a bit confused. So again, so we have the tents. There are walls available for all of the tents. As initially thought we'd use them for protection against pouring rain, but on that day it was extremely hot, and so we were thankful for any shade. And you can see again how well it can be used, the container, in combination with other workstations. So, and here we have additional stations, so for photos and for stretching the materials prior to freezing. And here, another video, so this is no longer drone. And you can see again the rinsing of materials. And we're about to go inside again. So you can see there are Melanex film currently covering the boxes underneath the counters. So that is not permanent, that's a temporary solution, because we found after the Stolberg operation, mud just got everywhere, and the cleaning operation took such a very long time that we wanted to prevent that, to prevent the mud getting into the boxes. So there will be a solution built. Just pause the film a second. So there will be a solution then to permanently protect the boxes underneath the counters to stop them getting muddy. So here again is the temporary photo station. So we have 2 cameras, I believe 4 laptops. We also have barcode scanners. And here, so this is an ingenious idea. So this is our hatch window, of which we have 2. And the idea here is that, so we have heating. So in winter, if we're using the heating, in order to not have both of the doors wide open all the time, losing heat, energy efficiency is very important, particularly at the moment. Then objects can be passed in and out of the small windows. And here is the dry cleaning station. I'll just pause again. So here will also be additionally 2 further taps and a sink then, so that the rinsing work can be extended to that part of the container, which just increases our flexibility even more. So these were all members of the different emergency associations. Some of them had been taken part in training days before, some of them hadn't. And it was really impressive how quickly everybody came together, how everybody found their role within the operation. We're really just enthusiastic to try it out, and useful for us as well to see how new people who didn't know anything about container could work with it, with a quick introduction, and then also to receive feedback. So here again we have the stretching stations. And so this second video, this was actually filmed in Stolberg. You can tell it's not a training day because of the very authentic mud that is there. So it was a really very, very muddy situation. And you can just see here one of the rolled architectural plans being rinsed and the amount of mud that's coming off it. So the aim is never to clean something perfectly, but to remove as much contamination as possible in order for it to be frozen then. So you can really get quite a good impression. So we were dealing with these conditions for about a week. And the anti-slip floor coming into its own here. Okay, so that was the end of the presentation. Thank you very much for everybody who was listening. So it was only me who was speaking today, but I'm also joined by Nadine, Thiel and Frank Peters. They are with me here in the room, and we would all be very happy to receive questions, or also if you would like to keep in contact with us, then please don't hesitate to send us an email. I think the presentation will be online afterwards, and so you'll be able to download it and also check our contact details. We're very, very keen for collaboration, for communication, generally for networking within Germany and internationally, which is why we're so excited to be able to talk to so many people today. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Henderson. I see we have one question already in the chat. How many people can actually walk in the container?
I'm just opening the chat now. Yeah, okay. I'm receiving technical assistance here. Yeah. So in the container, we have space for 7 to 8 people. So that depends on who is doing which roles, who is where within the station. But yes, so 7 to 8 people can comfortably work within the container. Are there any future training days planned? Currently, we're hoping next year to have a training day with the Emergency Association in Cologne. I'm not aware of any other training days at the moment, but we're generally really, really keen for ideas. So if there was interest in such a thing, then please do get in contact. So the electrical power. Oh, sorry. Yeah, so the first question I didn't read out. That was how many people can work within the container. So how did you realize the electrical power and water for cleaning? So the power comes from, we have cables, we have very long cables, and we plug it into the nearest available source of power. So just a household socket, or if in the case of Stolberg, there isn't any power available, then the fire brigade will provide a generator that we can then use. And the water was also connected to the nearest water hydrant. So the next question, how many organizations currently share the container have access to the container in the Emergency Association? So within our container in Cologne, there are 25 institutions. So we are just libraries and archives at the moment, so no museums. But as you have seen, so in the case of natural disaster, then other institutions obviously can have access to it too. And also the other training days, for instance. So there we are working with 4 different, or three additional emergency associations, and so all of their members had access to the container. Is it possible to have a certificate of attendance for the presentation? I believe that's not really a question for me. Perhaps somebody else can, one of the organizers can answer that.
Yes.
We addressed it online already.
I see, okay.
We issue certificates of attendance. That's no problem. Okay. Just mail it to me. I wrote it in the chat.
Okay, excellent. Is the container designed and built in Germany, Cologne? Is it custom made for the condition in the region? So yeah, so it was made in Germany. The company is Dunschede, and they are based in central Germany, and they specialize in the manufacture of vehicles and also a few containers. So for the fire brigade, for instance. So that was then custom made. So I could have said that as well. This is the first container of its kind in Germany, and I believe worldwide. So certainly custom made.
Grundlage ist von der Feuerwehr der Container für Versorgung und für eine Analytik.
Okay.
Vielleicht, dass wir das als Grundlage nehmen. Ne?
So the a base design, perhaps it can be compared with a fire brigade roll-on, roll-off container, which is for used, I believe, for Versorgung and analytics. That's for okay, the chemical analysis then, and also for taking care of people when there has been a disaster. So I believe there are some with tea and coffee making facilities and things like that. So there are other comparable containers, but for the treatment of cultural heritage property, this is the first of its kind. I saw two types of trolleys, low ones in aluminium and high with mesh screens. Which one would you recommend? I would certainly recommend the blue the blue trolleys. So the silver one doesn't work as well. We bought it because it was bigger and because we have the two tents. They needed to be stored. So we're actually hoping to replace the silver trolley. The wheels are a little bit unwieldy and it's difficult to control. Okay, here's another question. Until more containers are outfitted for different municipalities, how far is this one willing or able to travel? That remains to be seen, really. We'll have to see which situations arise. I mean, certainly with Weimar, for an example, that's I'm not sure how many 100 kilometers away, but they were prepared to travel for a long distance, and so we would hopefully be willing and able to do the same thing, really, to provide help where it's provided. Sorry, we have a technical emergency here. Oh no, I believe it's been sorted. So further questions. So what kind of scheme for condition reports did you use? It's a very good question. It depends, and we've used different ones in different scenarios, and it's always a really difficult point, I find, the documentation. You don't want to give too many details, too much information, because then it can become a bottleneck and really slow the operation down. But also you don't want to lose things potentially. And so we found that a simple paper documentation with numbers and identifying marks then on the documentation can be useful. So personally in the archive, we work with barcodes. So all of our objects are barcoded, and therefore it's a little bit easier. So if we in the historical archive have a situation, then we can use the barcodes and we will enter those into a database, and also photograph the objects alongside the barcodes so that they can be identified later. But it's a really good question. we have some different examples, which I would be happy to share, but also if anybody else has come up with a great solution for documentation, then I would be keen to hear it. Would it be possible to send more information flyer about how we can see the container live, both in Cologne and Leipzig, please? Thanks. Yes, I think that should be possible. Yep. Yes, we can provide the presenters of Leopoldina with the information, and they can then pass it on. We, as said, would be very happy for visitors coming to see us. Is the figure of 30 million for recovery that you indicated only or mostly for cultural heritage? No, I believe that's for everything. So hopefully, oh no. I'm being corrected. Yes, it's for cultural heritage. Excellent. Even better. Please share the contact information of the company who built the container. Yes, we'd be happy to. I'm sure they would be happy also. Was it necessary to waste any material? I'm not quite sure what's meant by that. To throw material away. No, so any cultural objects that are salvaged are kept to the greatest.
Das ist auch in Deutschland Archivgesetz. Also es darf, was Archiv ist, nicht weggeschmissen werden.
So also particularly for archives in Germany, perhaps it's the same in more countries, it's legally protected. So as soon as an object has been received into the archive, it's a legal requirement to protect that object. So it's not possible to throw things away, which also means in disaster, when something's been very badly damaged, it's legal requirement then to preserve it and recover it as best as possible. So here, the next question, the barcodes are generated during the emergency response, or are they codes given by the Cultural Heritage Institution? So that's a good question. So we do have emergency barcodes within the container that can be assigned to objects. Or as I said, so personally in the archive, we work with a barcode system. And so that wouldn't be necessary for us. It really depends on the institution and what they have available, then how they accession their objects, how they document them. So we want to be flexible to be able to work with all kinds of different systems that we encounter. I don't see any further questions. But as I said, so my email, as well as the emails of my colleagues, were available, and if anything else occurs at a later date, then please don't hesitate to send us questions.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm just about to write the company who produced the container into the chat, so bear with me. Okay. Thank you for bearing with me. So there we are.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we have the name of the company who did help in building this container. Thank you very much to the three of you for this very insightful presentation, and for the Q&A, also for the questions. Thank you to the participants. We have more of such events, so do stay tuned. we try and organize most of them in an English translation as well. If there is no more question, well then, I say goodbye to everyone. And thanks again, especially to Constance Breuer for the curation and organization of this series.
Yes, thank you very much.